Your checkout page just duplicated the Pay Now button and flickered two different prices on first load. The culprit: a timezone offset calculation that changed between server and client. The article mentions passing locale from middleware via accept language header, but doesn't show the pattern. Here's a concrete implementation. Read the timezone from a cookie or header in middleware, attach it to the request, and use it in server components to render dates in the user's timezone, avoiding mismatches. The article correctly notes that React 19 throws hard errors on mismatches that React 18 only warned about. However, it's important to know that this behavior is enabled by default in Next.js 16 with React 19. If you're upgrading from Next.js 14.15, you may encounter new hydration errors that were previously silent. The suppressHydrationWarning attribute still works in React 19, but it only suppresses the error. It does not prevent the client-side re-render, which can still cause layout shifts. The article mentions useID as a deterministic alternative to math_random for IDs. Here's a concrete example showing how to use useID in a client component to generate stable IDs across server and client renders, avoiding hydration mismatches. Let's break down how to fix Next.js 16 hydration errors once and for all, how it works, and the exact mistake behind that failure. Hydration is the process where React takes the static HTML from the server and makes it interactive by attaching event listeners and state. For this to work, the server-rendered HTML must exactly match what React would render on the client. Any difference, even a single space, triggers a full client-side re-render, discarding the server's work. React 19 now throws hard errors on mismatches that React 18 only warned about. The most common classic hydration error is accessing browser-only globals during render. On the server, window, document, and local storage are undefined. A type-off window guard that returns different values on server and client creates the exact mismatch you're trying to avoid. The fix is to return null on the server and set the real value in a useEffect. Here's the bad pattern: using type-off window to conditionally return a value. The server gets 1024, the client gets 1440, a mismatch. The good pattern uses useState with a null initial value, then updates in useEffect. On the server, it renders a placeholder. On the client, it sets the real width after mount. Any value that changes between calls, like dateNow, math_random, or cryptoRandomUID, will cause a mismatch because the server and client generate different values. The fix is to generate these values on the server and pass them as props, or use React's useID hook, which is deterministic across server and client. The broken component uses dateNow directly in render, causing a mismatch. The corrected version accepts a serverNow prop from the server, then updates the time in useEffect. For IDs, useID is the correct choice. It produces the same ID on server and client. Partial pre-rendering is now default in Next.js 16. It renders a static shell at build time and streams dynamic content through suspense boundaries. If you render user-specific data without a suspense boundary, the server sends an empty shell, but the client component expects data instant mismatch. This is the one cause after upgrading to Next.js 16. The bad pattern fetches user data directly in the page component without suspense. The server pre-renders an empty shell, but the client expects the user's name. The fix wraps the dynamic component in a suspense boundary with a matching fallback. The fallback must have the same element structure as the final content. CSS-in-JS libraries like styled components generate class names at runtime. With React 19 streaming, styles must be collected per chunk, and if the server and client generate different hashes, you get a mismatch. The fix is to use the Next.js compiler with the styled components flag, or better, migrate to Tailwind or CSS modules, which have zero hydration risk. If you must use styled components, enable the Next.js compiler with SSR support. This ensures class names are consistent between server and client. Without this flag, you risk different hashes on each side. App Router enforces a hard serialization boundary. Props passed from server to client components must be JSON serializable. If you pass a date object, the server sees a date, but the client receives a string and calling getFullYear. on it will throw. Always convert dates to ISO strings before passing them. The server component serializes the created@date to an ISO string before passing it to the client component. The client component then uses that string in a useEffect to format it locally. This ensures the server and client agree on the initial value. Third-party scripts that modify the DOM before hydration can cause mismatches. A/B testing tools are the worst offenders. The server sends variant A, but the client script swaps to variant B before React hydrates. The fix is to use next script with strategy equals, after interactive, or run A/B tests in Edge middleware. Use the after interactive strategy to ensure the script loads after hydration, preventing DOM modifications before React is ready. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. The cart total component called newDate, getTimezoneOffset, during render. On the server in UTC, the offset was 0, producing 1 total. On the client in a time zone like UTC-5, the offset was -300, producing a different total. React 19's strict hydration check saw the text content didn't match and triggered a full client-side re-render. That re-render mounted the checkout component twice due to a race condition with state hydration, resulting in 2 Pay Now buttons and flickering totals. The root cause is using newDate, getTimezoneOffset, during render, which returns different values on server, UTC, and client local. This caused the cart total to differ between server and client HTML, triggering a hydration error in React 19. The fix was to move the time zone-dependent calculation into a useEffect with an is-mounted state guard. The server renders a time zone-agnostic placeholder, and the client updates the displayed price after mount. We added suppressHydrationWarning only on the price display span, not the entire component, to prevent the flash. This ensures the server and client agree on the initial HTML, and the real price appears after hydration without a mismatch. This is the exact mistake from the hook incident. getTimezoneOffset returns different values on the server, UTC, and client local time zone. The cart total differs. React 19 detects the mismatch, and the entire checkout re-renders, causing double buttons and flickering. suppressHydrationWarning only silences the console warning. It does not fix the actual mismatch. React still tears down and re-renders the suppress node, causing a flash of changed content. If the node contains form state, the re-render can reset user input. Never use suppressHydrationWarning on interactive elements like inputs. This is a classic PPR mistake. The server pre-renders the page without the user data, so the HTML contains an empty div. On the client, the component fetches the user and tries to render the name, causing a mismatch. Always wrap dynamic data in Suspense. When a hydration error appears, start by clicking the React 19 overlay to see the exact diff between server and client HTML. Then grep your code for common culprits like date, mathrandom, or window. Check for missing suspense boundaries if you're using PPR. Finally, disable JavaScript in the browser to see what the server actually sends. If the page looks right without JS, the server is fine. Let's run through some common interview questions. What is React hydration and why does Next.js 16 throw where 15 warned? React 19 requires exact match of element types, attributes, and text. React 18 only warned. Plus PPR now streams shells mismatches that were hidden now surface immediately. How do you debug a production-only hydration error? Run Next build turbo and a Next start locally. Use React 19 overlay for side-by-side diff. Check for PPR missing suspense, var differences, and third-party scripts. Disable JS to isolate server render. Difference between suppressHydrationWarning and fixing root cause. suppressHydrationWarning tells React to accept the mismatch without warning or re-render, but content still flashes. Fixing root cause ensures server and client render identical HTML via props or useEffect. And a few frequently asked questions. Can I use dynamic = import /comp SSR false to avoid hydration errors? No, it excludes the component from SSR so it won't appear in initial HTML, bad for SEO. Why does hydration error only happen on first visit? Usually third-party script race or PPR cache. Test in incognito with extensions off. Check if error only on first visit, missing cookie. How do I handle dates safely in Next.js 16? Never format during render. 3 patterns. 1. Pass timestamp from server, format in useEffect. 2. Read timezone in middleware, pass as prop. 3. Render ISO on server, replace aftermount with suppressHydrationWarning. Let's recap the key takeaways. Hydration equals server HTML must exactly match client first render. PPR, browser APIs, time random, CSS-in-JS, boundary violations, third-party scripts. Return null on server, hydrate in useEffect. SuppressHydrationWarning prevents error but not flash. Ready to go deeper? Up next. Next.js 16 plus React 19 complete migration guide, then advanced error handling and logging in Next.js 16 applications, then building an AI SaaS from scratch with Next.js 16, and building multi-agent AI systems with Next.js and LangGraph. Find them all at TheCodeForge.io. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.